Venturing once more into the boundless tapestry of the Marvel Multiverse, we find ourselves poised on the cusp of a gripping journey. Like the Marvel Multiverse wasn't crazy enough already, they've come up with a bold yet bizarre experiment in the form of a series where realities collide, destinies intertwine, and we find ourselves at the precipice of possibilities we never imagined before. This escapade into uncharted territory brings us one electrifying twist after another, unraveling the mind-bending probabilities in an alternate reality known as the What If series, where the lives of our favorite superheroes are turned completely upside down. We all know how Peter Parker became Spider-Man and chose the path of becoming an iconic hero, illuminated by the loss of his cherished Uncle Ben, whose wisdom and guidance instilled in him a resolute sense of responsibility. His indomitable spirit has always been tethered to his profound love and connection to his family. But what happens to Peter Parker when Aunt May dies instead of Uncle Ben? How does the friendly neighborhood web-slinger react to the heart-wrenching loss of his loving aunt, whose nurturing existence kept Peter Parker grounded and gave him the confidence he needed as Spider-Man? In this video, we'll delve into the captivating tale of heroism, adversity, and the untold complexities that lie beyond the well-trodden path. In a multiverse teeming with infinite possibilities, let's explore the unknown and witness the evolution of a Spider-Man forged under different stars, under a different narrative, in the very first issue of the What If series. So, without further ado, let's find out. What if Aunt May had died instead of Uncle Ben? Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What happened to Peter Parker after Aunt May was killed and Uncle Ben was imprisoned? The comic begins with reminding us of the very events that led Spider-Man to taking up his superheroic mantle, how he was pushed around and bullied by the entire world until a radioactive spider bit his hand and he realized he could scale walls like a tarantula. In his early life, only his family really loved and understood him. Yes, we're talking about Aunt May and Uncle Ben, who loved and raised Peter Parker like their own son. Peter started gloating about his powers and even let a robber get away without even making an effort to stop him, because why would Spider-Man the Great waste a second over some street thug? At least he thought that way until that same street thug attacked his house and killed his Uncle Ben, leaving him with a lifetime of regret and a lesson on how with great power comes great responsibility. These events led to his ultimate transformation into the amazing Spider-Man we all love and cherish. Well, the narrators of the comic intervene right here and we finally begin the prime story arc with a posed possibility of what if Uncle Ben had gone out to get a gallon of milk that night only to find his house immersed in a swarm of cops when he returns. Ben Parker is distraught as the cops tell him that his wife was shot by a burglar and it was too late. While the cops are explaining the details of the incident to Ben, Peter comes back home and starts sobbing uncontrollably at the sight of his beloved aunt's demise. While Uncle Ben guilts himself for not being there to protect his wife, a cop tells Peter how they have got the burglar surrounded and trapped in an old chemical warehouse and assures justice for his aunt's death. Peter, completely lost in grief for the loss of the only woman who cared for him, starts flipping out and tells Uncle Ben that he's going to the warehouse to catch hold of the murderer of his aunt. When Ben tries to stop him, Peter impulsively rips off his shirt to reveal the spider suit, implying that he would not stop until the scum who killed his aunt paid his dues. Ben steps aside and Spider-Man takes off, going through the secret tunnels to the warehouse where the perp was trying to make an escape. At the sight of the web-slinger, the burglar starts shooting his gun, but it was no match for the Spider-Man, who somersaulted at him and knocked his top hat and gun right off. While the cops are confused at the noise of the gunshots, Spider-Man sees the face of his aunt's killer, the same man who he allowed to escape because chasing some street thug was beneath him, and now because of that, his Aunt May was dead. While Uncle Ben runs in to stop Peter from making a rash move, Peter charges at the burglar, who gets so scared that he backs up right towards the edge of the window, trips over the ledge, and falls to his death from the 4th floor. Ben's worst fears had taken place, leaving him with no choice but to submit himself to the cops so he could shield his only child from the confines of prison. As the cops arrest Uncle Ben and drag him away, Peter Parker silently watches from the ceiling as the last bit of his broken life is being wiped away. Although he receives a lenient sentence, Uncle Ben goes off to jail, leaving a 15-year-old Peter Peter Parker to the foster system and leaving his transformation as Spider-Man to take the blame for everything that went wrong with his family. Peter keeps jumping from one foster family to the next and goes to occasionally visit his Uncle Ben in prison, who asks him to let go of the troubled part of his life. Uncle Ben was worried that Peter would go too far as Spider-Man, until one day it would be impossible for him to differentiate between good and evil. As a result, Spider-Man disappears from the face of the earth, leaving people curious about his whereabouts. Like we said, Aunt May's absence is the ripple effect, which is the major crux of this tale, because as Peter wallows in self-pity, he missed out on his first real heroic mission, leading to the death of J. Jonah Jameson's son, who was an astronaut. Now, Jameson was appalled at the fact that the world was busy raving about the disappearance of Spider-Man, who was probably some charlatan, especially compared to his son John, who was the real American hero, according to him. Jameson left no stone unturned. He went to press conferences and published statements saying that Spider-Man is nothing but a masked phony who is a horrible influence on the youth. Apparently, he was enabling kids to imitate him and fall to their deaths, and that's just the beginning of what could happen if people continued to treat him like a celebrity instead of a lawless monster. Jameson carried on with his bad-mouthing, finally making Peter lose his patience. Peter dons his spider suit and sneaks out that night to pay Jameson a small visit at the Bugle. He threatens Jameson by hanging him off the edge of the building and warns him to get off his back if he didn't want the world to see what a menace Spider-Man could be. While Peter returns back, he realizes that he felt good about himself for the first time in a very long time. Even though what he did was completely over the line, he didn't really care. As the plot unfurls, it's obvious that Spider-Man lacks his usual morals because of his relentless rage, turning him darker by the day. It goes so far as to show Peter cutting way too loose, paving his way directly into juvie. Ironically, Peter meets both Flash Thompson and Harry Osborn in jail, who were booked for drug abuse. They mercilessly bully Parker in the facility until it becomes too much for him to handle. Peter is enraged that the one time he breaks his promise to his Uncle Ben and becomes Spider-Man, it ends in an absolute disaster. He knew he couldn't survive a life behind the bars and breaks himself out, living on the streets and getting by on his own wits. Peter was left with no choice but to become Spider-Man again, because that's the only way a 16-year-old would survive the streets of New York. He lived from one empty building to the next and stole his necessary supplies in the dead of the night so he could sustain himself. It wasn't something Peter was proud of, but he simply could not let the world push him around anymore, and he wanted to be free. Anyways, Peter realized he needed something more solid if he was going to survive. So, when he saw what similar people, like the Avengers crew, did with their powers, Peter started hunting down the same supervillains as he did in his Earth 616 reality. Only this time, he charged a hefty sum for it. He faced the same enemies like Doc Octopus, the Vulture, and the Lizard, but it was his confrontation with the Green Goblin that completely opened Peter's eyes on what these psychopaths were truly capable of. The Green Goblin literally killed a few bystanders without an ounce of regret, and this senseless death reminded Peter of his own culpability in his aunt's demise, driving him berserk. The Goblin warns him that there would be countless bodies if there is any obstacle in his path. This was definitely a bad move, because Spider-Man loses his goddamn mind again when he realizes that the fact that those people had children, parents, and families who loved them meant absolutely nothing to these monsters. He beats the Goblin to a pulp, leaving him in a comatose state. As Spider-Man stands over the Green Goblin's unconscious existence, all his old mistakes come rushing back to haunt him, and he starts panicking over the possibility that he actually killed the Beast, even if he didn't mean to. It should be noted that in this version, Spider-Man never really learned his lesson because he didn't have to face the consequences of his decisions. Even when he actually caused someone's death, his Uncle Ben took the fall for it, and Aunt May's death was compounded. With Uncle Ben in jail, he had to look out for himself, but in his Prime Earth version, Peter was driven to be good and strong for his Aunt May, and he embraced the great responsibility he was burdened with, as compared to this version of Peter Parker, who was simply thrust from one horribly tragic circumstance to another. Anyways, with the Green Goblin not meeting his demise, the world finds out that Norman Osborn is actually the Green Goblin, and he's sent to a psych ward for analysis under guard. This causes Peter to go deeper into his downward spiral. He guilt trips himself for everything and believes that there is no justice in his world because his Uncle Ben didn't even do anything and got sent to prison without a second thought, as opposed to the Green Goblin, who took several lives only to be sent to a psych ward. Spider-Man impulsively eventually decides to break his Uncle Ben out of jail, who leaves Peter stunned when he says that he didn't want to escape prison like this and wouldn't leave until he was legally released, because that would be equivalent to being trapped inside 4 walls. A life on the run was not the life of dignity his wife would want for either of them. Ben tells Peter that he was in jail because he made a choice to protect his child, because it was his responsibility to protect Peter from a cruel fate. He knew life was not fair, but it wasn't fair for anyone, and running away from accountability for the decisions we make is not the solution for it. And because Peter was gifted with a distinguished power, his responsibility was even bigger than the rest. But the choice was completely his. He could either help people who were not as strong as him and make his family proud, or he could simply continue down a selfish and destructive path, which would resemble everything his kind Aunt May stood against. Peter finally breaks down and confesses the truth about how he let the burglar get away, resulting in the death of May Parker. Ben consoled him and told him he didn't deserve to carry this burden because he didn't make that maniac kill May. He encouraged Peter to give himself a second chance instead of wallowing, because he could not alter the past, but he could definitely make sure that his future was different. Ben tells Peter to honor Aunt May's memory by returning to society under the care of their neighbor, Mrs. Watson, who had agreed to take him in. Uncle Ben wanted Peter to finish high school and apply for college, to finally take responsibility for himself and grow up. After this life-altering speech, Peter took up his Uncle Ben's advice and started his healing journey. He moves in with Mary Jane's aunt, finishes high school with an honors degree, and goes off to Empire State University on a science scholarship. Peter also hits the jackpot with Mary Jane by starting to date her while living with her aunt, and we see them going to town on each other in a movie hall. Amidst all this, Spider-Man's journey takes a backseat, only to be seen during occasions when something big comes along that nobody else other than he can handle. Peter's main focus is making his Uncle Ben and Aunt May proud. Because of his impeccable behavior, Uncle Ben gets an early parole and helps Peter circle back to the speech he had given, how with great power comes a greater responsibility. These were mere words until Ben helped Peter put some action into it. They became a powerful duo, with Uncle Ben as the tactician, driving around the streets of New York with a police scanner and a radio to immediately update Spider-Man. The ending to this might seem that Spider-Man ends up exactly where he was in the primer, except for the tiny tweak of his Uncle Ben helping him, but it is actually so much more. This version of Peter Parker grew to be more well-adjusted. He was brave enough to confess his mistake to Uncle Ben, which finally allows him to shed the big weight he's been carrying around and aim for a growth that trumps even the original Spider-Man. As the issue ends, we get a better glimpse of the narrator, who is wearing a sketchy t-shirt that says, "For I am the Watcher," and leaves us wondering if he really is the Watcher, that omniscient observer who is peering down, witnessing a tale that both mirrors and diverges from the reality known as Earth 616. Marvelous verdict! Throughout this comic exploration, we witness how poignant Uncle Ben's role in Peter's life has been. Their team-up at the end encapsulates the essence of their journey, a testament to the enduring bond that has shaped Spider-Man's path. In the annals of the multiverse, What If Aunt May Had Died Instead of Uncle Ben stands as a testament to the myriad possibilities that dwell beyond the familiar. But unlike all of Spider-Man's story arcs, this one focuses more on him as a person, his personal struggle at the face of every adversity, and how he turns the table by becoming a true hero instead of just being a frustrated kid with superhuman powers. We see him making mistakes like a human would, but we also see him owning up to his shit and working through his unresolved trauma to finally do better in life by healing himself before he could go on an expedition to heal the world. With that, we've come to the end of this video, but it's been such an exhilarating ride for us, and we would love to explore many such distinguished story arcs in the future. So let us know which story from the What If series you'd like us to cover next. Let us know in the comments section down below, and if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.